from the banking world. It's funny because there's a lot of people that start out in banking and then go into real estate. Maybe they realize like, damn, I don't want to really work 80 hours a week.
Designing an experience for someone to enjoy, and you're really on the hospitality side of things, you can get super creative with the things you do. And in turn, the more creative you get, the more revenue drives.
Generally, when you have a sophisticated level of criminal on these things, then it's not even like the lowlives. It's the like white collar criminals that have figured out that
professionals.
That they're professionals.
Basically, like overtaking someone's castle, right? You know what I mean? Like I'm thinking like you got to get thrown in jail or something, right? And I know the eviction process is to get them out.
If you want to do something, get creative in that aspect. Put your message out there, and then you never know. You're one video away from you becoming the person who talks about these things.
Everything is brand new. It's gonna last, it's gonna last for centuries with modern day building codes and modern day construction processes.
And I realize a lot of people go into this game and they just are focused on investing in general, and they don't think to invest in themselves.
Life is people, friendships, family, and camaraderie. And I think that the more people tap into that, you don't have to be a lone wolf. You don't have to go at this alone. And I think for many things,
when you talk about like your finances, your family, your marriage, your life goals and whatnot, nobody has everything. Nobody has it all.
Welcome back to the Wealth Juice Podcast. As always, it's your boys, Ryan and Corey here with another episode for you. Today we had on George McCleary. He is a real estate investor out of Portland, Oregon. We gave a heavy emphasis on today's episode, talking about something that we really have never covered, and that is squatters. I think this was very prevalent during COVID, and you hear people kind of going into other people's properties and overtaking them and establishing tenancy. And there were a lot of issues going on, and George kind of made a name for himself. He decided to do a social experiment where he would go and literally overtake someone's property and record himself doing it. And it went viral on social media. And he was doing it to raise awareness for it, not to actually overtake, and just show like the big issue that there is in the United States with people having to deal with squatters. And he's done quite the big media tour after this. A lot of people, including like Dr. Phil, Fox News, they're all reaching out to him like, dude, that's unbelievable. Everyone knows a person that has had to deal with the squatting. And he decided to put a course together and help people out with this. And as a real estate investor of 20 plus years himself, he's seen this over and over. So I thought it was just a fun episode with a different twist than we usually do.
Yeah, it's kind of like a niche down episode of a specific topic, and it's something that's like extremely needed in today's market. And not only does he talk about squatters, but like deed fraud, which is something that I kind of like had vaguely heard about, but basically like people are stealing properties and selling them off, and then once that equity is gone, like the homeowner who had it stolen is kind of shit out of luck. So we talked about ways to prevent. He has a product that, on the deed and on the squatter side that you can jump into to prevent this from happening. But, we talk about title insurance. We talk about his development plans and how he feels that actually developing is much easier than rehabbing. So he has a portfolio of his own. He's a West Coast guy, very laid back, very, very, very nice dude. He's in GoBundance, which is a mastermind community. We talk about communities and just an overall great conversation about like the power of networking, social media, and also just like community in general. I had a great time chatting with George.
Yeah, I did too. I think without further ado, let's bring him in. George, officially welcome to the Wealth Juice Podcast. Corey and I are so excited to have you on the show, man. I know we talked a bunch pre-recording just about what we're going to talk about in this episode. I'm thrilled. We haven't talked about this topic. I won't give it away right now, but I just wanted to first off, thank you very much for joining us on the show. We're excited to have you.
Oh, thanks so much, Ryan. Thanks, Corey. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome, man. So let's start here. Maybe give us your origin story. Tell us pre-real estate investor, and then kind of when the light bulb went off for you when you're like, okay, I need to dive in and become a real estate investor, entrepreneur, and you got the bug.
Yeah. So in college, I went to business school, and the only reason I did that is because that's where the money was. I wasn't really super into it, but I kind of got the bug, and I went to work for an investment bank, which at the time was really hard to do. I think it's still hard to do, but I was really glad to have gotten that job. But then I gave it up pretty quickly because I just really didn't like it. And I moved to Australia, became a surfer, and read a big stack of books on real estate. And I'm glazing over a lot here, but basically came back after 6 months and said, okay, I'm a real estate investor now. And then I bought a duplex, then a triplex, got my license, and just kind of jumped in with both feet and went from being a low-level banking assistant up to being a low-level real estate investor just pretty much overnight.
What was it about real estate, I'm curious, that made you want to get into it? Like, from the banking world, it's funny because there's a lot of people that start out in banking and then go into real estate. Maybe they realize like, damn, I don't want to really work 80 hours a week or whatever it is. Does that play into your story?
A little bit. A lot of it was the tangibility of real estate. I like to create. I like to be able to touch things and point to something and say like, hey, that right there, that was me, or I own that. This is my project. And I really loved that about real estate. And still to this day, that's one of my favorite things.
I love that. I think a lot of people get focused on the numbers, and I think it really is cool to, we've learned about this a lot more in the real estate, or excuse me, the Airbnb space, where it's like designing an experience for someone to enjoy, and you're really on the hospitality side of things, and you can get super creative with the things you do. And in turn, the more creative you get, the more revenue drives. But then for the longer term units, it's kind of nice to be able to provide an amazing place for someone to live. Just like, it goes down to the little things, from just the appliances you put in, the colors of the properties, the amenities you put in. And so I'm on the same page as you with that, because I think some guys really focus just on the numbers because they're thinking like, let's churn and burn, let's make as much cash flow as we can.
Yeah.
But there's so much more to it.
There's so much more to it. And that tangibility aspect, you're providing a product, you're providing a service to people. And people forget that, whether you're selling toasters or refrigerators or dog walking services, we're providing a service and we're creating a product. And if your product is lousy, maybe the market will rescue you, but over time, probably not. Like, you got to have your game tight.
Yeah, we had an experience, George, when one of our properties we bought in 2021, where it was like, not heat of COVID, but like just after, where the rental market was skyrocketing. And we had a bunch of people come like view a property after we get done rehabbing it. And the people that moved in were like so thankful and grateful that like we were renting it to them. And I had always seen the other side of real estate where everyone hates landlords. And I was like, I don't really want to be those guys. Like, that doesn't really that's not our brand. That doesn't make sense. Like, why would we be shitty landlords? Like, so when they were like, oh my God, thank you for the opportunity. Like, this is good. I just knew that they were going to take care of our property, and they're with us 4 years later, and they signed 2-year leases. So, and
Perfect.
They only call if something needs to get fixed. And guess what we do when they call? We fix it, like so that we provide that good product. So I think that aspect is overlooked so much in this game, because you can be, the slumlord and like narrative. I'm noticing it. Maybe it's just my algorithm, but I notice it on social media where it's like people are being called leeches all these days. And I'm like, I'm not sure where that happened along the line. Maybe because of inflation, and because like, owning real estate is sort of a luxury in a respect, but it's took a turn. So we'd like to revolt against that in a way. And I know that you have kind of a product or part of your story has to do with squatters, and we'll get into that too, because that's like definitely the anti-landlord.
Oh yeah. No, and I actually got hit with that a whole lot and going viral. There was a whole lot of people that said like, hey, we just figured out that you're actually a developer. You're not really a squatter like you claim to be in your video, and you're really like, a terrible landlord, and so it really gets highly politicized, and it's an unfortunate thing.
Yeah, totally. So I think the premise or the theme of this episode is going to be talking about squatters, because I mentioned to you, we have not had anyone on the show that has talked about this. And it is a very fun and intriguing topic, to be honest. Like during COVID, we heard a lot of people even sometimes where people would lock themselves in other people's homes, right? And then they would retain semi like ownership of the property, or they could stay in there. It was the craziest thing. I was seeing a lot of stuff online. Take us to your viral video. Let's start here. What you put together, and then kind of what came from that. And then we'll dive in all the way on like what squatting actually is, and we'll kind of take it piece by piece.
Totally. So what happened to me was Super Bowl Sunday earlier this year. I woke up and I was just sort of fed up. There was a lot of policy around my city in Portland, Oregon, that I just was not down with. And it had to do with a lot of things, but where the buck stops with me is at my livelihood, and that is real estate. And what was happening, and I'd heard this from a few friends, that squatters had basically developed a system, not just in Portland, but everywhere, to break into a property and establish tenancy in it but by way of breaking and entering and duping law enforcement into thinking that they actually had the right to be there. So like I said, I never actually had like a full blown squatter, but I had like minor cases here and there, people in my flips and development projects that I, had to get rid of. And it was usually like homeless addicts who just wandered in there. But this was a much more insidious, intentional form of squatting that we were hearing about. So I made a video. It was a real tongue-in-cheek video called I Stole a House, where I pretended to be a squatter. I said, this is how I stole a house in Portland, Oregon, and totally got away with it. And it basically goes through like busting into a lockbox, getting entry into a property, and then getting established so that when law enforcement shows up, they can say, hey, I've got this lease here. It's fake. But I've also got my furniture moved in. Sorry, officer, I'm not sure who this person is, but I think they're mistaken. I'm definitely the tenant here. Then the cop says, well, looks like we got a he said, she said situation on our hands. So you guys are going to have to go fight it out in court. So meanwhile, the owner is like losing their mind and wondering, what the heck, how did this person get tenancy rights in a place by breaking in? It's absolutely absurd. But the reality is, guys, it's happening everywhere, nationwide, blue state, red state, anywhere with landlord tenant laws, which is all 50 states. This can happen to you. So I made the video. It completely exploded. It got called up by Fox News, News Nation, Dr. Phil, went on a bunch of shows, and they actually talked about me on Joe Rogan at one point. It was pretty wild.
Okay, so I think I heard this episode then. I didn't know it was you. I listen to Joe a lot. I love what he does from a podcasting standpoint in terms of like learning how to be a better podcaster. So I listen to that. I like a lot of his guests too. So I did hear this. I'm just very curious about, I know you mentioned blue state, red state, and we don't really get political on the show, but like
Sure.
it's pretty obvious that it's easier to buy real estate in red states. But my question is like, I can't figure out what policy would be in place that would allow this to happen that makes it seem legitimate for like any government to go along with it. I just don't I can't wrap my head around it. I understand, and I've talked about this on many shows, like the balance between landlord and tenant laws. There's exploitation that happens all the time, and it's negative. And like we just said earlier, when something breaks, we fix it. We don't want to be slumlords. But when it comes to breaking and entering and robbery and stuff like that, I just can't figure out where the crossover happens, where it's like how are these people allowed to do it? How can they get away with it? How come there can't be a quicker judicial system that wraps this up in favor of the person who owns the home? So maybe you know the answer to that.
Well, it's not quite that simple, and you're dealing with certain things that are universal. The first one was landlord tenant law. We got that in all 50 states. And then there's law enforcement and the judicial system. So when you go to court and you got to kick somebody out. In blue states, just speaking very generally, it's a whole lot harder to get rid of like a deadbeat tenant, somebody who stopped paying, somebody who's overstayed their welcome on their lease. That's a whole lot harder in blue states in general terms. And so, but what's universal, red state or blue state, is the fact that possession is 9/10 of the law. The shirt on your back is presumed to be your own unless you can have somebody there that can prove that it's not. And so if you're in a possession of a house, pulling somebody out of the house and arresting them can only be done unless you've got a really good idea as a law enforcement officer that this person has indeed committed a crime and that you're arresting them for good reason, or else you're going to get in trouble. And a lot of states, again, with the blue states, they're not backing their law enforcement to the degree that they do in red states. And so you mess up in one of these municipalities, then you can really be held accountable in a pretty harsh way. So are they going to stick their neck out for you there? Probably not. So it's a difference then at the judicial level as to whether you're going to be able to get them out easily as a tenant through eviction, or whether you're going to go the ejectment route, which is actually what you should do. But that's a long docket process in pretty much every state, and that's going to take you a whole lot longer. So you're stuck with eviction, which is what you do with tenants, people that had have the contractual right to be at the property. And getting rid of a tenant in some states, it's real simple. You can get them out in 30 days. Other states, you're in there for like a whole year or longer.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. I'm curious about what you think landlords can do to protect themselves against this. I think that's probably like the number one topic that people are maybe wondering. I had a situation just before you answer, I had a situation with one of my first tenants who they were late like each month, and I thought it would get to the eviction process and they would always pay. And I know it was in New Jersey, and I knew that if I had to go through this eviction process, it was not going to be pretty and it was going to take months. And if they got wind of how long it would take, this person would likely take advantage of it. It never got to that point until I sold the property because I made a good profit and somebody else ended up evicting this person. I did my best to try to keep them, right? I didn't want to kick them out, but I'm curious about maybe the specifics on the squatting. She wasn't squatting. She would just pay late. What are things that landlords can do or people that own property can do to prevent it? Are there things?
There sure are. And so I made a course called Squatter Defender, and it's an online course that teaches squatter prevention, detection, and ejection. So the first part of that is prevention. And that is, keeping them out of there in the first place, because as we all know, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And the biggest thing by a country mile is just being able to know who's coming and going from your property. And how do you do that? Do you have to mount a bunch of cameras? Do you have to get a big, expensive alarm system? No, you get a very simple alarm system that's portable. You can take it from one unit to the next. I use a system from Simply Safe. That's a leading brand nationwide. I'm not affiliated with them or anything, but if you buy Squatter Defender, you get 50% off any system you buy, plus you get a free camera. So your total cost for this is like $100 or something. It's really low. You get a motion sensor, a camera, and a tower that makes a big bunch of noise if anybody comes in. But best of all, you just get a notification on your phone like, okay, hey, Corey, looks like somebody's in your house. So you pull up your camera. Oh, it's the plumber. Forgot to tell him. Okay, sorry. Or, wow, I do not recognize this person. And what squatters all have in common is if they've gotten established, they've had time. Time is not on your side when it comes to being a landlord and having a squatter. If they're in there for an hour, then it's pretty unlikely they will have moved in their buddies, mowed the lawn and waved to the neighbors and gotten established.
Got it. I'm curious about maybe the difference in different states and how this works. It sounds like Portland and Oregon in general maybe have a really rough time. I imagine this would be tough in New Jersey and New York and California. Mm-hmm. Is there a difference between the blue states and the red states in terms of how this is handled? Only asking because we own property in Florida, and I know that if there's an eviction needed, it's not a severe process. At least it doesn't take that long. So is that the same case with squatters?
Yeah. So if you've got a squatter and you're in a red state or blue state, and so first you need to establish that you actually have a full-blown squatter, and that's when you call the cops and say, hey, I've got this guy in here, he doesn't belong there, get him out. And the cops turn to you and say, hey, here's the thing. It looks to me like, there's there's a shadow of a doubt as to whether or not he's supposed to be there or not. I can't really tell. You guys have to go figure this out. That is the moment that you have a squatter and that you need to take action. And so if you go through the judicial system in a red state, then yeah, it's going to take probably less time. But a lot of times these people are, using government money with government agencies. They know how to file continuances. They just know the system. And so I don't know how it goes state to state on these things, but generally when you have a sophisticated level of criminal on these things, then it's not even the low lives. It's the white collar criminals that have figured out that that they're professionals and they know how to extend it. So I can't say definitively if you're in the world, in the nation's most landlord friendly state, which I've heard some people say is Arkansas. Even there, they're going to find some way to stick it out and get more free rent because that's their bottom line. That's their objective.
Got it. Okay. What about, I'm curious about, I know that we are chatting particularly on the squatters. If you want to go back and talk to us a little bit how you built your portfolio, we can go back to the squatter stuff too, but I know you mentioned triplex, duplex, you kind of did it the traditional path, and then you got into development. How did you have that crossover and how did you navigate going from a traditionally pretty simple strategy of going house to house to development, which is in our eyes a little bit more complicated? We're a general partner on a development project, but Ryan and I are not development experts. So how does that work?
Really quick. Yeah. I know we talked pre-recording on this, so I don't think we established what your portfolio looks like exactly. Yeah. So if you could paint the picture, just what you currently have roundabout, and then we'll dive into Corey's question.
Sure. So I started off buying plexes, and I actually still own a handful of those. And then I got into single family flips, and the single family flips did a bunch of those in state, out of state. And a lot of those flips I held on to because I started getting these flip incomes and thinking, boy, these taxes are really hitting me. So I started hanging on to some of those. And as we all know, single family just doesn't cash flow all that great, especially not in cash flow markets like in Oregon and California. So I'll break even, make $100 a month, lose $200 a month on a bunch of them. But then once I sell them, if it's been like a year or two, then I don't have to pay the short-term capital gains or ordinary income. So the Uncle Sam takes a little bit less. And then if I simultaneously have other flips going, then I can take a depreciation expense if I decide to hang over onto those as rentals. Accelerated depreciation on single family is not spectacular, but if like you've got a few of them, then yeah, you can offset like a good chunk of income. But as to how that relates to sort of bridging the gap to development, eventually at some point you get to the point where you've got a big enough project to where you think to yourself, God, it probably would have been a lot easier just to tear this darn thing down. And I came across one day that was just like that. And it was in a really nice neighborhood. And I thought like, what exactly is the top of the market here? So I looked it up and it was like, well over $1 million. And I was buying this place for like, $350 and was going to put like 100 into it and try and sell it for like, 600 or something like that. And I'm like, you know what? Why don't we just tear this thing down, see if we can chop off the side lot and build like 2 really big $1 million houses. And then I was like, well, that guy next door also has a pretty decent chunk of land too. And so what I did is I bought 2 houses that were right next door to each other that had a lot that I could confirm in the middle of them and built 3 luxury homes in this one neighborhood. And that was sort of like my first like full blown, like, let's go ground up. But it was a single family house and it wasn't rocket surgery. So I did that a few more times and then moved on to apartments and the rest is history.
Okay. So I want to know about the process of doing development because I think for anybody that is listening, it sounds super daunting. It's like I built a home, right? I'm curious about the process and how much longer, or maybe it didn't take longer, it was from doing a rehab where you put $100,000 into it, permitting, all the stuff, contracting, all that, to doing development where to me, it sounds like it would take a lot longer with like zoning and codes and all that. Is that the case? Or maybe we haven't done development specifically, Ryan and I ourselves.
It does take longer. In a word, yes, it does. But the process is very similar to if like a flip where you have to get permits and get an architect and get an engineer. So being a developer, all it really is coordinating an architect, an engineer, and a GC, and then, project managers and other people. But it's essentially the same as a very very thorough flip with permits. It's just that you have to get permits for, the entire darn thing. And if you have an architect, then they're going to help you with that as part of their scope of services. It's basically having to figure out whether it works the same way that you would have flipped. Like, okay, I'm going to pay this much. And at the end of the day, it's going to be worth this much. But it's so much easier, guys, when it comes to the actual construction of it, because having to, make sure that you buy windows that fit like this certain hole or whatever. No, everything is brand new. It's going to last, it's going to last for centuries with modern day building codes and modern day construction processes. And it's like, yes, things break, things go wrong, but there's a reason why guys go from flipping to development. It's because flipping 100 houses is a whole lot more difficult than building 100 houses.
Got it. Okay. You gave us the way that you got into development. I have a specific question about like scams and pitfalls and stuff like that. Before we get there, talk to us about your entryway into apartments. Are you doing development on apartments now too, or are you buying and doing value add?
So I am doing some apartments right now. There's 24 units in North Portland that I'm building with some partners right now. The thing with that is it's large enough to where it's not something I'm doing all by myself. And so I've got some partners on that, and one of whom is the GC. And so when you're in bed with the GC on these things, it's a good thing because they get paid extremely well to do this stuff. And if you ever really dug into a contractor's bill on like a really big job, they're making money in a whole lot of different ways. And having full transparency on that is, can be kind of difficult. So having a guy in-house that's helping me build those things or helping my group build those things is pretty big. But then we are looking for more multifamily projects in Portland, but I'm also looking for industrial things outside of town. Like right now I'm building an industrial complex in a little cow town in Oregon, but it's got some data center growth. So I'm really just into, I've kind of got ADHD, guys. I get bored easily. I got to be able to, chomp into something new. So I started reading about industrial development. I said, all right, you know what? I can do that. It's just a metal box. Let's do that. And
Very cool.
I got two really quick, and it's back onto the squatters topic because I'm stuck on it. I think it's so intriguing. Can you talk about like, is anyone ever prosecuted for this type of stuff? Like, for example, you're basically like overtaking someone's castle, right? You know what I mean? Like I'm thinking like you got to get thrown in jail or something, right? And I know the eviction process is to get them out, but can you get convicted after that and just say like, how long can people get locked up for? Or is it something where they're just like, they want to wash their hands of it, they don't care?
It's extremely rare. People do get locked up for it, but it's in like really egregious cases where they've proven like after the fact that there was breaking and entering and something went wrong. But more often than not, what happens is you got a squatter, you call a lawyer, the lawyer says, okay, well, looks like we have to evict them. And you go through the civil process. And then, I mean, what are you going to do? Go after the squatter for damages? They don't have a pot to piss in. You can't get any money out of them. And if you call up the DA and say like, hey, this guy was squatting, he's going to be like, didn't you just evict him like he was a tenant? Like, no, I'm not going to go after this guy.
Jeez. Okay, cool. It was, so this brings me to my last question on this topic. And I know if it's my property, right, it's going to make me feel some type of way, right? It's interesting hearing people's stories of when it happens, but what are some of the craziest methods you've heard people utilize to remove these squatters? Because I'm sure you got some more stories.
For sure. So there's the really crazy ones. There's like the really tragic ones. There's ones where like the homeowner has been like unalived by a squatter, or the other way around. Maybe not so tragically when the squatter meets their fate, but bear traps, booby traps. Basically what happened, guys, is after I went viral, I had just the world contacting me saying like, oh, like all of the people saying like, oh, this is great. And then all the people saying like, hey, you suck. I hate your video. And then everybody saying, hey, this happened to my grandma. This happened to me. This happened to my friend. And I was like, tell me about it. So then the really compelling cases, I would actually Zoom call with these people. And that's how I ended up getting my like kind of pseudo PhD in squatting, because there was just no consolidated information on this. And that's basically what I put into Squatter Defenders, just all this consolidated information from the stories. But I guess if I had to pick a favorite, I think it would probably be the snakes. The snakes is kind of what I go with, because basically what the owner did is he got a very large amount of snakes and poured them down the chimney. I'm not sure where he got the snakes. I'm not sure how the squatter felt about that, but not very good, I would guess, because he left pretty much immediately after the house became infested with snakes.
That's a good one, dude. I like that.
Yeah, that guy plays dirty. That's funny.
Oh yeah,
fire with fire, man. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
This is interesting, George. It's funny. I want to talk about how this is kind of like the power of social media in a way. You become the de facto like champion of squatting by having a video go viral. And I think that's like a testament to many things, right? I mean, it's like kind of putting your message into the universe, and like you have created it's not all about money, right? But you've created a new revenue stream from that by like teaching people and educating them on how to defend this by having one video go viral. And I think people are coming to you like as if you know all of the ins and outs of it, so then you have to go learn it, and then you do. And I just think it's a message for people that like, if you want to learn something, or if you want to do something, get creative in that aspect, put your message out there, and then you never know, you're one video away from you becoming the person who talks about these things, right? And I'm not suggesting that people should talk about them if they don't know about them, but it's just kind of like, one thing leads to another. And it's like, think about how many people go viral on like those stupid like street interview stuff, and then they become famous. I mean, so it's like,
yeah, the Hawk Tuah girl has been dining out for a while on that one interview.
Oh yeah.
That's where I thought you were leading us, Corey. Yeah, you said
I kind of was thinking of her.
Nice.
That was the only street interview that I could think of. But yeah, you're absolutely right, Corey. I never set out to become like the squatter expert, but it just sort of happened to me because, after going viral, everybody had something to say about me, and everybody wanted to like get in touch with me to talk about their squatter stories. And I thought to myself, okay, all these people have one thing in common, is that none of them knew what to do or knew where to turn. This is absolutely an underserved market. And I've got a really unique opportunity here as like a lightning rod for this, because all this information is being funneled like directly to me. And I've got better access than maybe anybody in the entire world right now to this type of information. Let's consolidate it. Let's actually figure out. And I was like, all right, I'm going to write a book. And then I started writing the book and got a ghostwriter. And I was like, yeah, and I am still doing that. But it's basically now about like different types of real estate scams that can sink your ship. But then I'm like, okay, I need to educate people. And that's what gave birth to the Squatter Defender product. But then along the way, I also learned about title and deed fraud and was like, this is even worse. And so I learned about that.
Well, that was my next question, actually. Like, what exactly is deed fraud? Does it come from a squatter? Is it somebody that like, is professional? Like, how does this work? Is it during the transaction when somebody buys the home, they put a different name on it? Like, that's where my mind went. I'm just curious, like, how does that work?
So it comes in different forms, and you hear about people like impersonating sellers every so often. Like, Ryan will say, "Hey, yep, I'm Corey. I'm here to sell the house. You should wire the money to my bank account." It's just a little bit tougher to actually make that work as like a financial crime. But the really like terrible form of it, and what's making investors and homeowners lose the entirety of their equity, is essentially this. So Corey has a property. It's titled in his name or the LLC. Ryan goes on the dark net. He gets a fake ID saying that he is somebody with a stolen identity, like a third party. Say it's me, steals my identity. And they've got social address and everything, gets a perfect fake ID for this stolen identity. So it takes the deed for Corey's house, or it falsifies a deed for Corey's house, puts it in this fake name that he has, and suddenly he's the owner of the property. There's no security measures other than the notary stamp on the deed when you sign those docs to buy a house. It's that simple. You just take it down and you file it at the courthouse, and title transfers. So wow. Then, which is crazy. So then Ryan's got his fake name now owns this house. So then he calls up a local wholesaler and he says, "Hey, want to buy this house? I just picked it up for this $400,000 house for $300,000. I'll sell it to you for $305,000. Wholesaler says, "Great." So title opens up and they check it and they say, "Okay, looks like this guy bought this house like 4 weeks ago. Well, it looks like he's making a $5,000 profit on it. All right, that works." So so they sell the party to the wholesaler or a third party they assigns it to, and Corey's equity is gone. If he calls up a title insurance company and says, "Hey, my property just got stolen," the title insurance company is going to say, "Well, here's the thing. You have what's called a Alta owner's policy, because check your closing statement. That's probably the policy you have, and that is from the effective date, which is when you bought the property, to the past." And if you were a victim of fraud and impersonation from that's after the policy date, you got nothing. You're not going to get it back. So you're in a real bad way. And it happened about 10,000 times last year, but you don't really read about it. But when you do, it's pretty tragic.
No, I've never, and it sounds like it ends up being like a spider web of too many paths to go forward, and it gets sold once, gets sold twice. And it's like, is there nothing you can do at that point? And then like, is there any recourse, or are you kind of shit out of luck at that point?
You're basically SOL. You can, so there's been instances where people have, passed land for the title's gotten stolen, land is passed, and then passed again, and that person started building on the property, and wow. So then you've got a full like house there, and then you've got your original owner who used to own the land, and so then you got people suing people, and meanwhile, the criminal is made off with all the money from the original equity and is sailed off into the sunset. And
it seems like in that circumstance, if they impersonated being somebody else, there might not even be a record of who they actually are to find them too.
Oh yeah, no. And no, if notaries would actually take a picture of a license that there's of everybody that they're signing, put it into a database, at least then they'd like have a photo of a guy, maybe, but they usually don't do that.
Yeah. So This is interesting stuff. I'm curious, a couple more questions as we wind down the show for me. Is there anything that homeowners can do or people that are selling properties can do that can protect themselves from the deed fraud? Like anything up front, just that people can know as they buy and sell more real estate?
So that's the thing. There's nothing that I or anybody else can actually do to prevent deed fraud, but the consequences of deed fraud are having your equity stolen. So that's what we work for as real estate investors, is to build up our equity, build up our wealth in our portfolio. And it's that can be protected, is the equity. Because if you get a title monitoring service like the one that I have, which is Title Fraud Defender, then Corey, as soon as your title was stolen, you'd know about it right away. You get notified, say, all right, hey, Corey, looks like your title changed. Want to make sure that you knew about that and that it was actually you that did it. Because if it's not, then you file an affidavit of false filing. You call up the title companies. You make sure that nothing can happen to your property at that point. But if you don't have that, then there's pretty much no way that you're ever going to know about it. So that's pretty much it.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay. Well, as we wind down here, first of all, this is great information. This is, we've not had a podcast. This is your episode 230 something. We've never had a podcast, anybody talk this in depth about squatters. So I think people that are listening, they should absolutely, look into this and follow George and look at his course to protect yourself. And George, we can give you, you mentioned a promo code at the beginning. We can plug that at the end. But before we get there, I'm curious if you have any future goals with your real estate business. Where do you want to take it from here on out? Like, what do you see the next couple years looking like? Are you focused more into the growing of the maybe not a community, but growing the course and growing the amount of people that come into Fraud Defenders? Like, what's the route that you like to take?
People have asked me lately, they're like, hey, so with Squatter Defender and Title Fraud Defender, is that your new job? Are you going to grow that business to be like $1 trillion business and just give up on real estate entirely? And I always tell them, we'll see how it goes. And if it makes like a crap ton of money, then like, okay, yeah, I could see myself doing that. But it's going to be pretty hard to beat what I got going in real estate, man. Like, I've been working at it for 20 years and, I can pick up properties and use them to grow my wealth and make income. Like, it's not like easily, it's not like I've got like a magic wand, but I've got a 20-year head start on this little side hustle that I got. So what my goals are, so I'm part of a group, gentleman's group called GoBundance. And what we do is we get together and we talk about high level stuff, like, our goals, finances, like really like down to the dollar. And so what I wouldn't share with one person, it would be something I would share with somebody from, the GoBundance tribe, because I can say like, okay, I'm trying to buy X amount of real estate this year. And they're not going to be like, oh, wow, must be nice. I can't relate to that at all. No, they're going to be able to relate to it because they're trying to do that exact thing. And I think it's great when you've got really like-minded people that are setting goals together that are, in context that people can understand. And so what my goals are is just to continue to, grow my portfolio, grow my wealth, and grow my income. I'm a little bit older than you guys. We established that before the podcast. And I want to be able to like not work in a certain amount of time. I feel like I'm always going to work a little bit, but I'd say my goal is to transition in the next 10 years into, less being on the active side of, developing and acquiring, and more, I'd say, on the passive side, just managing my portfolio, maybe getting into some like LP positions rather than always having to be the GP and doing all the work, and sort of just, setting myself up for just more passive income and not having to worry laying awake at night about my portfolio.
Beautiful, man. I mean, I was just going to say, and Ryan, I'll let you finish this off, is that you have kind of GoBundance is amazing. Ryan, I would love to get into that at some point. I think that I didn't know that you were in GoBundance. We know a lot of people who are.
Oh, nice.
It's kind of another plug for just community and masterminding in general. And for people that are listening to us, they may or may not know that Ryan and I have a community really teaching people how to buy their first or next rental property. So it's mostly for people who are just starting out, but when you get in rooms, and we've seen it proof, when you get in rooms with people who are doing bigger and better things and have their head on straight and have more worldly conversations and are just networking with higher level people, you have no choice but to rise to their level with the accountability that's put in place. And that is, I feel like, the biggest missing piece from people who just get started. So quick plug there for our program, but I just think that you set us up there perfectly, George, with being in GoBundance, and it changes your world. It changes
your world. Yeah, no, if anybody listening isn't a part of you guys' community and they're looking to actually buy that first round or that second or that third, mentors like Corey and Ryan are exactly who you need to talk to, whether you know it or not. And if I had done something like that when I first got started, oh my God, I would be so much farther ahead now. Like, we just didn't really have that. If we did, I didn't know where to look, but it's come such a long way over the past 10 years, that if you can go from just a simple house hack up to owning a massive array of properties within a shorter amount of time, it's crazy. And I see these guys, they're coming up in their like 20s or the early 30s, and I'm like, oh crap, this guy's gonna be way ahead of me in like the next like 5 years. They've just got a tool belt that's like, oh boy,
the world is flat and the information's available to everyone. So I mean, the people that are joining our program are doing it well before we did, which is great. I love that. I think that it's like somebody that's 25 just closed on a property. Ryan and I, maybe what were we doing at 25? Maybe just starting to think about real estate and as a concept, and then waited probably 3 years too long to get involved. So anyway, it's great. And having a community that's good of like-minded people that you can bounce ideas off of is invaluable. So Ryan, I'll let you ask anything else that you want to do towards the end.
Thanks. Yeah. You guys, I'm kind of going to echo your point here, but George, that's what I remember. That's why we had you on the pod, or at least we started the conversation. We got an email. I think it was from you or someone that was setting up the interview. Me. And I saw your,
I wanted you guys directly.
Yeah, my guy. Okay, cool. I saw your hat. You had a hat on there and it said GoBundance. I'm like, dude, he's part of the tribe. And we do, like I mentioned, we know a bunch of people in there. We were in Emerge for a while. Jamie is the best. Jamie Gruber, for those who don't know. But I personally read Tribe of Millionaires, and it's a short book, but I resonated with it so much. And I realized a lot of people go into this game and they just are focused on investing in general, and they don't think to invest in themselves. It's like an aha moment you have, and I don't know many people that think about that, right? We talk about this a lot in our podcast, but Corey and I both athletes, have played an array of sports growing up, and we had coaches our whole lives on things, right? And then you have teachers your whole life, and then you get out of college or high school for some, and then you're just thrown into the world, right? And you're like, okay, well, I have a manager now and a boss, but like they just want me to do the task to better the company, right? So you don't have someone to like better yourself on a daily basis, other than going to the gym or reading a book, right? Like you're trying to help yourself and like throw darts at like random things to get yourself better. But when you have a mastermind, it really streamlines things for you. And I think what I like about GoBundance, just because it's like a sister company of Emerge, I can kind of speak to this, like those little pods of people that kind of break apart, and you talk about like an array of things. It's family, health, wellness, investing. Like it covers everything. So you're not just, it's not just one specific thing. And that's what I really liked about it in general. I was like, wow, I'm becoming a better person, and now I'm focused on it. And you realize through the conversations that you have with people, everyone's going through very similar things. And, like maybe health things are different for others, but like you're still going to get hit with some BS along the way. And it's really nice to have an outlet of people to talk to about it, ask questions, and you can go so much further together. So, that's kind of why Corey and I built our program. We had a bunch of followers on Instagram, a bunch of people listening to the podcast. We're like, people are DMing us questions. Like, we got to bring this offline and like actually have humanized conversations with these people. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's those human conversations, man. And a lot of it has to do with something that, we as men don't really talk a whole lot about, which is vulnerability. When you talk about like your finances, your family, your marriage, your life goals and whatnot, nobody has everything. Nobody has it all. I don't care who you are, how successful you are, nobody's got everything. And so if you drill down on your one sheet, that's where you cover everything that we've talked about. There's a big focus in GoBundance and in these type of communities that we're talking about money, because everybody wants to be successful, desperately. Success takes a lot of forms, and most of the time we are talking about money. But even if you are ultra successful, but you have no relationship with your kids, you're just not going to feel like a complete man. And communities like these, they foster that type of vulnerability to say like, yes, my last couple of deals went really great, but I tell you what's keeping me awake at night is this. And so I've been in rooms with men, tears streaming down their face, who are worth tens of millions of dollars, talking about issues that they have that are very, very personal to them. And it's that sort of interaction that just, it builds trust. It builds that type of bond that you have with these guys. And that sort of trust is, it's a big cycle of giving and receiving. And so that when you go to somebody within the tribe, you've got that level of trust and, camaraderie just kind of built in. And it's extremely valuable, not just for money, but for, all the facets of our lives as men.
I couldn't agree more. I think there is this sentiment that building wealth is like the end goal for people. Like, you have to be wealthy and you have to have this this massive amount of money. And then I think about it like this: well, if you make all this money, but you have nobody that's there to share the experience with you, it's like, there is legitimately no point, in my opinion. Like, there is no point to imagine being a billionaire and having no one else on earth. It's like, what would you even do? What's the point? You have no life is people, friendships, family, and camaraderie. And I think that the more people tap into that, you don't have to be a lone wolf. You don't have to go at this alone. And I think for many things. So I think the next 5 years, you're going to see community even drive up even higher. And it's going to be more niched down to like, what do I specifically want to do? And Ryan and I saw that opportunity. Part of me feels like we're even late to the game, but we saw an opportunity to make sure that we're speaking to people that kind of speak our own language, and that's, I when I see somebody that comes into a program and buys a first rental property and even if we're just a small piece of that story, again, this isn't really about our program as much as it's just community in general. And I just think it's truly invaluable to share those experiences with people who care.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that you guys do a great job of being your authentic selves and helping your community in an authentic way so that people can maybe not just focus exclusively on wealth building, but also just, being the best they can be, even if it's just in the context of real estate.
Totally. We always say, and it's not, I didn't make this up, but I always say, like, don't go buy the real estate, be the person that you have to become who would go buy the real estate. Like, who is that person that you want to be, who has the capabilities of going to do that? And by that, you have to be kind, you have to be ambitious, you have to look out for others, you have to build a team, you have to, all of those things. So I could talk about this for hours. I love this topic. Ryan, did you have something?
Well, you just made me think about this. It wasn't the about real estate investing, but becoming a millionaire. And I think a lot of people have that goal to become a millionaire. And I forget the quote, but it's right what you were saying. Is like, it's not becoming the millionaire. It's who you become on your journey to becoming a millionaire, and just all the things you go through. And that's resonated with both of us. We think about that all the time. It's like, really, like, there's so much BS we all deal with on a daily basis, right? I can speak to you. George, I know you're millionaire status. Like, it just, you realize that people are just humans, even when you get to that level. And there's so many things we're all going. I said this earlier in the podcast, but like, we're all going through similar stuff. We have family things going on. We have to balance our social life, our professional life, building wealth for others, like figuring out what we like, enjoying life for what it is, right? You get wrapped up in the cycle, and like, it's so nice to be able to have the conversation with people. And it's funny when you know right away when you talk to someone that just gets it, and they're like, dude, I needed this conversation. Like, we have people like almost like not onboarding calls, but discovery calls with people to potentially coming into the program. And a lot of it comes down to, they're like, dude, this is amazing. Like, I can't look to my left and right at work and talk about this on my W-2 job. I also can't talk to family about this because they just don't get it. They're wrapped up in their own little worlds. And it's just like, I'm glad we realized it when we did, because we were feeling a type of way, and we went and sought mentorship, probably from reading the book, right? Tribe of Millionaires. And like, it opened horizons from there, and listening to podcasts. But so I think it's, long story short, putting a bow on this, I think investing in yourself and in these communities and getting around other like-minded individuals, you can't put a dollar on it. And it helps you become a better version of yourself. It helps you feel fulfilled in a way. It gives you purpose. You're helping others in it too by sharing your story. It's just it's kind of a weird cycle that's just really powerful that I love. And I'm so glad we're into it, because I love philosophy. I love helping people. And it's just like this room that we're in right now. It's a small little Zoom and a tiny crevice of the world. But I'm excited. I'm energized. And like, dude, thank God we had this conversation today. It was just nice. Like, I needed it.
Yeah, man. Amen, brother. Amen. Yeah, no, you got to talk with those people that not only get it, but also like get your juices flowing, like get you motivated. Because just like you're saying, Ryan, like, it's hard day after day to like, stay in good shape, be a good husband, be a good father, and also like, build wealth, build your bottom line. it's freaking exhausting, guys. Like, we can all admit that. And you need to harness energy wherever you can get it, because, I'm like an energy vampire. Like I need as much as I can get, because, trust me, in 10 years, when you guys are my age, like you'll feel it a little bit more. Like, getting out of bed, you got to have something that's pushing you and be like, oh yeah, I am stoked about this project. I am going to absolutely crush this project. And being able to get that energy from other people that are out there crushing it, like, man, that's better than Adderall. It's better than
100%.
It's better than coffee.
We've done that too, so that didn't work as well. But George, this is awesome, man. I love having conversations with good people who have good intentions, and I can just feel it. So we appreciate your time.
Yeah, man.
If people want to learn more about you, if they want to, learn more about your product, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you? And feel free to, I know you have a promo code for our listeners.
Totally. So squatterdefender.com is where you're going to find the course that I made on squatters. You can complete it in an afternoon, and it is the most comprehensive source of information about squatter prevention, detection, and ejection. Take it before you have a squatter. Trust me, it's a whole lot better that way. Prevention's better than cure. And that promo code that you were talking about, Corey, is JUICE for Wealth Juice. So put in the promo code JUICE, and that'll get you 20% off of Squatter Defender, and then also Title Fraud Defender. That is the title monitoring software. It's just a few bucks a month to begin with. So our competitor, I think, is $20 a month. So this is just like, $5 a month if you just do one property, and it goes down to like $2 a month if you do multiple properties. So it's really good for investors. Throw your portfolio in there. And if you sell one property, you can swap in another property. It won't cost you anything. And that also has the promo code JUICE for 20% off. So find me there, but then also find me on social media. I'm at MRD_Portland on Instagram, and I'll get these guys to put my information in the show notes. But shoot me a message on social media. I'd love to hear from you.
Beautiful. This is awesome, George. Thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it, and it was great getting to know you today.
Great conversation, guys. Thank you so much.
Yeah, gave me a boost of energy for the week, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in this week to the Wealth Juice Podcast. If you liked what you heard, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, and share with friends. The more ratings we get, the more ears we'll get on our show, and in turn, we'll be able to provide you with more high-quality guests. You can also find us on Instagram and YouTube at Wealth Juice Official, where we post daily tips, tricks, and document our own journey towards financial freedom.